Hi everyone. I wanted to make a video today. It's kind of, I would say it's spur of the moment, but it's catalyzed by something that happened on YouTube involving a creator that I like. And before I begin anything, I want to say that this is all in good faith. This is coming from someone who respects this person's work. The person that I'm talking about is Bad Empanada, and they are a video essayist on YouTube who specializes predominantly in the interpretation of history through a post-colonial lens. At least that's what I tend to focus on through their work. They largely talk about things in a post-colonial way, and they actually have two channels. They have a main channel where they post most of their essays, and they talk about different post-colonial conflicts in regards to ongoing genocides and atrocities and just all around bullshit committed by the United States and their allies on the global stage. And this ranges from Israel and Palestine to South America and various things going on in the global south more broadly. So they actually do very good work. And another thing that they do is they also investigate corruption in so-called leftist spaces on YouTube. And that a lot of the activism that they do has to do with Zionism and apologizing for the current genocide by various individuals like Lonerbox and Xanderthal and Destiny, people like that, but also investigating sex pests and sexual abuse allegations in the leftist breadtube community. And I put leftist in quotes because the people that they investigate, like Ian Kuczynski, they go by Vosh, is someone who, despite sort of LARPing as a leftist and saying that they're a leftist, is actually an out-and-out sexual predator who's defended by the system that they operate on, preying both on young members of their own community that view them in a cult-like way, while also giving actual practicing leftists a bad name. And this is effectively an issue of applied theory, putting your money where your mouth is and letting your actions speak for the theory that you're putting out there. And you can say different things and posture as a leftist, but if you're a sex pest, that sort of invalidates all that. It would be like if, oh yeah, I'm against genocide, but then it's uncovered that you are actually working for Israel or Nazi Germany back in the day or something like that. You have to actually function as a leftist and not just brand yourself as one. And people like Vosh do that in bad faith, specifically so that they can prey on vulnerable underage members of their communities. They go to these places and they say, trust me, I'm a leftist, I'll fight for you. But then turn right back around and dog whistle to predators inside communities that they can draw to them and shore up an inner circle of people, other content creators, that basically have the same brand image, but also the same predatory habits. So someone like Bad Empanada is actually doing good work insofar as they investigate these persons quite steadily. Zionists and sex pests alike, I mean, they're related to each other insofar as state predation on various groups leads to all manner of exploitation, sexual or otherwise. And as far as that goes, I have nothing but the utmost respect for them. The only times that I really have an issue with Bad Empanada is they sort of delve into deeply sarcastic, sardonic, borderline nihilist humor that becomes a little bit indiscriminate. So, for instance, when Aaron Bushnell committed suicide and martyred himself, you had someone like Bad Empanada who's like, well, you're a fucking idiot, and there's no value in what you did. You're just stupid. And honestly, I felt like that was a pretty dismissive thing to say about someone who, regardless of what you have to say about what they did in a more nuanced form, it's like, okay, they committed suicide as a form of activism against the state. Like, it's not a healthy thing to do. They're committing suicide, but they died putting their money where their mouth is, and they stood by what they did till the very last moment to make a statement against the state in ways that do have lasting impact and value. And the value isn't necessarily that it's good for them, and they're not encouraging that other people go and commit suicide, but they did it themselves. And martyrdom isn't strictly something that you can discount. People do it often as a last resort, very similar to suicide bombing and various other heists and criminal acts that are sure to spell certain doom to the practitioners of said acts. And to have someone like Bad Empanada say, oh, that's just completely meaningless. Okay, well, that doesn't just translate to someone like Bushnell, but other people who are doing it as well. And the argument I think that he was making was, okay, well, he's an American, he's a member of the Imperial Corps. Yeah, but protests can occur within America against the Imperial Corps, and that's specifically what Bushnell was doing. So his tendency to dismiss a lot of things out of hand just because it falls under, say, the Imperial banner, and it's like, okay, that's not legitimate because, and sometimes he has very hard stances insofar as postcolonialism goes, and that's good, but also he can be a little bit rigid and sort of caustic in ways that I feel like take away or detract from the value of his arguments otherwise. And it's like, I'm not apologizing for America or the Imperial Corps or anything that they do through any aspect of their policies and acting bodies in an official or unofficial capacity, but something like what Aaron Bushnell did was ultimately against the very things that, Bad Empanada is also protesting. It was against the Israeli state. And so this video is in continuation with Bad Empanada sometimes lacking a little bit of nuance and sort of feeding into his very abrupt, harsh, sardonic humor. He said something today about me in particular that made me want to make a video about myself and the work that I do. Now, admittedly, originally I was responding, or he was responding to a comment that I said about something that he had said initially, that at the end of the day, he was ultimately talking about a very specific group of people. But the comment in question here, people who talk about sex constantly and openly like it's their main interest must be dealt with. Make it taboo again. So I respond kind of glib and offhand. As a sex worker, activist, and BDSM doctor, I'm not sure how to feel here. And he says, BDSM doctor? That's not a fucking thing. Jesus Christ. And he has a way of talking like that too, where he can be very dismissive and kind of a know-it-all. And as far as like BDSM doctors goes, I can assure you that there are people who study BDSM in an official capacity, but also I think what he's speaking to be generous to him, it's generally something that is policed and is within academic communities, and it's not something that is necessarily encouraged in academic communities. So if you think of a BDSM doctor in an academic sense as opposed to like a medical sense, there is a lot of pushback and resistance in academic fields of study as far as that goes. So I, in good faith, respond, I'm an independent researcher but wrote my postgraduate work on the Gothic, Ludology, Marxism, and BDSM. I have multiple books out about sex positivity and BDSM, kind of an odd mix, but BDSM is absolutely a part of the work that I do. And you're right, I don't have an office or work at university, but I do come from an academic background that branched off into non-academic work that I'm trying to share with people to help make others more sex positive and left-leaning in the field towards liberation for different marginalized groups sexualized under capital. I go on to add, I should add that I don't engage with minors, no minors. Minors do not interact per the usual sex worker style, and the vast majority of my work is on my 18 and up website, which I can't even link to on YouTube. I think your post is referring to sex pests on YouTube, whose young audiences they prey off of while calling themselves leftists, which I agree is entirely wrong. My work is basically entirely off-site, and while I view it as strictly educational and made for purposes of satire and critique based on my academic and non-academic extracurricular work, it's something I predominantly discuss with other sex workers. So, right off the bat, I want to point out that, I'm responding to him and explaining that, yes, actually, I am real. I'm a real person. And I would understand that why he might think otherwise insofar as on YouTube, the discussion of topics like BDSM and sex work are incredibly policed. Like, it would be very difficult to talk about the things that I talk about on a regular basis on YouTube. I can't even share a link to my 18 and up website. If I post that, it just gets like flagged automatically. I can't, it's my videos, if I have any kind of imagery at all, even if it's censored, generally speaking, like if I talk about artistic nudity, for instance, or the asexual components of BDSM, nudism, things like that, a lot of sex workers are ace, it will get flagged as 18 and up. So it's very difficult for me to even promote my work at all. And so him responding in that way, in part, speaks to that, policed, taboo nature of sex work on YouTube. So when he says people who talk about sex constantly and openly like it's their main interest must be dealt with, well, I know he's talking about, at least I think he's talking about people like Demon Mama and Vosh, who are predatory in the way that they talk about sex constantly and openly like it's their main interest, insofar as their main interest is preying on people behind a veneer of, I talk about sex and worker rights and things like that, but in my case, when I talk about sex constantly and openly, it is my main interest, but for purposes of education and critique, and I'm not about preying on people, I'm about liberating workers, all workers, including like openly sex workers, but also people who, for all intents and purposes, are sex workers, like women's work, for instance, people who are married and expected to do their wifely duties, and also people who in marginalized communities are forced to do sex work to survive or lean into stereotypes surrounding themselves as, practitioners of sodomy, homosexual men, lesbians, bisexual, pansexual, gender nonconforming people more broadly. We are often categorized that way through satanic panic. So that kind of thing is very much something that, it's in our interest to talk about, parallel to people who take the same rhetoric and use it in bad faith. So when Bad Empanada is talking about people who discuss sex constantly and openly like it's their main interest and they have to be dealt with, I want to try and humor him and think, okay, well, it's a joke and he's talking about so and so without actually naming anyone, so I have to speculate to some extent. Makes talking about sex taboo again. This is literally puritanical argumentation. And again, I think he's joking, but the moment I say, well, I'm a sex worker, activist, and BDSM doctor, I'm not sure how to feel here, as in your comments kind of make me feel a little uncomfortable. His first thing is to dismiss what I do and the fact that I exist, which, as a trans woman, on top of my academic, expertise and interests, I have multiple books about this, and I'm going to go into that next. I did kind of take that personally a little bit, which is why I'm making this video. So one thing that I did was I responded initially, just like, look, I am an independent researcher and I don't have an office at university. I don't work at a school. A lot of my work is done independently on the internet, on platforms where I can talk about this thing in places where I'm not policed, which is predominantly my website. My website was something that I originally designed to escape censorship and still be able to talk about things that were important to me, which, yes, includes sex and the application of sex in an academic to non-academic form through like Gothic poetics, ludology, which is the study of games and play, BDSM, which is play through power or power exchange, knowledge exchange, generally through a Gothic sort of poetic form, and gender studies and Marxism. So I combined all of these things, and this is something that emerged slowly over time. I started my academic work the second time around. I went back to uni and I got my undergrad, and then I got my master's degree, and then I started pursuing my postgraduate work, and then from there I set up a website, and then I just wrote what I would consider to be my PhD in independent form, along with various other books as well. So that was book, volume 0, then volume 1, volume 2, part 1, volume 2, part 2, and so on. So I ended up writing multiple books, and it's not something I can easily promote on YouTube. It's just, it's very difficult. I can't link to my website where these books are found, and I can't really talk about it on here. I can talk about it on various other social media platforms that tend to be a little bit more loose or flexible insofar as what you can discuss and not discuss insofar as sex goes. But making the discussion of sexuality taboo just to police sexual predators, it's like going after a mosquito with a bazooka or a nuclear bomb. It's going to punish people who aren't the individuals that you're critiquing. And so this is, Bad Empanada is very rigid and staunch insofar as his post-colonial stances go, but as far as his the nuance required when discussing topics like sexuality and things pertaining to sexuality and gender performance and things like that, statements like these don't have any nuance, and they open the door to, yeah, let's censor everything, which is going to lead to genocide. It's something that me as a trans woman am experiencing, my friends are experiencing, my partners are experiencing on a regular basis. We are killed and attacked, and there are pogroms against us in the United States and elsewhere in the world. And this is a problem that coincides with the rise of fascism. And when someone like him says, you're not real, and make these discussions taboo entirely, these are the very things that I'm fighting against. And it's like, I'm not his enemy, but also, fuck you, asshole, I am real. And as far as that goes, I wanted to spend the rest of the video sort of going over proof of my existence. It's like, yes, I do these things, and I want to show people some examples. So, first and foremost, I have a variety of books on my website, and I thought what I would do initially is just give you an example. Like, my books are part of a project that is non-profit, and they look basically like this. They are, the project is called Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion, or Gothic Communism, Liberating Sex Workers Under Capitalism Through Iconoclastic Art. If I remember correctly, that's the full title of the series. It's Sex Positivity for short, and I have different volumes, and it was inspired by Foucault, who, yes, I realize is a sex pest, but his volumes, The History of Sexuality, are actually, important works that we can work off of and expand upon, while also acknowledging that someone like Foucault is a sex pest. Absolutely. But I got the idea from A History of Sexuality, so I was like, okay, Sex Positivity, Volume 0, 1, 2, 3, and it's part of a series. And I ended up doing like subdivisions, like part 1 and part 2, etc., because I just kept writing more and more. But the books themselves look like this. Generally, the front cover is censored. Usually it's closed. It's still, I designed the logo myself, so there's a whole, discussion that we could have about that. But basically, it's the trans symbol made into a skeleton key, and with a narco-communist symbol and colors, and green and purple and things like that. Make it gothic, right? And so there's the undead component, there's the demonic component, and various other things going on to try and communicate as much as possible in a single sort of icon or image. So this is a logo that I designed a while back now, a couple years at least, it feels like. I forget exactly the date that it went live, but I could pull it up, I suppose. But right now I just have everything pulled up in such a way that, I just want to sort of move through things. But this is the logo, and the covers generally look like this. It's a green and purple kind of theme. The front cover is censored, and it'll have something like volume number, the topic, and first edition, copyright, the date of my website. Harmony Corrupted is someone who I work with. My name, Persephone Vanderwaard, and it links to my website here. And if we scroll down, the first thing you get after a censored cover is the disclaimer. And I'll read that just to drive home the point that I don't generally, it's difficult for me to talk about this kind of stuff because it does tend to get censored. And, minors under 18 do not initiate that kind of thing. And it's in my bio on Twitter and Blue Sky and various other places. But also I'm acknowledging here, like, okay, the first thing you see with these books, if someone was to just access one, they'd be met with a cover and then a disclaimer, and then there's a whole thing here. So, disclaimer: if it was not good, it was true. If it was not artistic, it was sincere. If it was in bad taste, it was on the side of life. Henry Miller on criticism in the Supreme Court level lawsuit he received for writing The Tropic of Cancer in 1934. And then I go on to say, regarding this book's artistic, pornographic nudity and sexual content, sex positivity thoroughly discusses sexuality in popular media, including fetishes, kinks, BDSM, gothic material, and general sex work. The illustrations it contains have been carefully curated and designed to demonstrate my arguments. It also considers pornography to be art, examining the ways that sex-positive art makes iconoclastic statements against the state. As such, sex positivity contains visual examples of sex-positive, sex-coercive artistic nudity borrowed from publicly available sources to make its educational critical arguments. Said nudity has been left entirely uncensored for these purposes. While explicitly criminal sexual acts, taboos, and obscenities are discussed herein, no explicit illustrations thereof are shown, nor anything criminal, i.e. no snuff porn, child porn, or revenge porn. It does examine things generally thought of as porn that are unironically violent. Examples of uncensored erotic artwork and sex work are present, albeit inside exhibits that critique the as-seen potential from a legal standpoint of their sexual content. Quote, ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated masturbation, excretory functions, lewd exhibition of the genitals, or sadomasochistic sexual abuse, unquote. For instance, there is an illustrated example of uncensored semen, a breeding kink exhibit with zombie unicorns and werewolves, that I've included to illustrate a particular point, but its purposes are ultimately educational in nature. The point of this book isn't to be obscene for its own sake, but to educate the broader public, including teenagers, about sexual positive artwork and labor historically treated as obscene by the state. For the material herein to be legally considered obscene, it would have to simultaneously qualify in 3 distinct ways, aka the Miller test, after Henry Miller. Appeal to prurient interests, i.e. an erotic, lascivious, abnormal, unhealthy, degrading, shameful, or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. Attempt to depict or describe sexual content in a patently offensive way, i.e. ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, masturbation, excretory functions, lewd exhibition of the genitals, or sadomasochistic sexual abuse from above, and lack of serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Taken as a whole, this book discusses debatably prurient material in an academic manner, depicting and describing sexual conduct in a non-offensive way for the express purpose of education vis-a-vis literary, artistic, political enrichment. I go on to add to the asterisk about teenagers. While this book was written for adults, provided to them through my age-gated website, I don't think it should be denied from curious teenagers through a supervising adult. The primary reason I say this, apart from the trauma writing sections, which are suitably intense and grave, is that the academic material can only be simplified so far, and teenagers probably won't understand it entirely, which is fine. Plenty of books are like that, take years to understand more completely. As for sexually developing readers younger than 16, ages 10 to 15, I honestly think there are more accessible books that tackle the same basic subject matter more quickly at their reading level. Something like It's Perfectly Normal, which is ages 10 and up, but it still talks about sex and sexual health and gender and things like that. And it's very educational and, frankly, someone like Matt Walsh would consider pornographic because there are illustrations of individuals under the age of 18 even who are experiencing sexual feelings and puberty and stuff like that. They're growing and developing and having sex with each other. And there's also illustrations of other things that are generally taboo, such as the depiction of childbirth and sex between husband and wife, and just couples more broadly, not just heteronormative sex, but sex between gay men or lesbians, bisexual people, pansexual people, etc., gender nonconforming individuals. So a book like that would, I think, be a good start. And then once you're 16, 17, something like that, and you're probably already reading, being introduced to writers like Foucault, A History of Sexuality, from an academic standpoint. And there are better works than Foucault, but he's just the one that leaps to mind. And it's like I'm critical of people like Foucault or Simone Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, who in an academic setting absolutely abused their students. And in Foucault's case, he was a sex tourist who took advantage of people, in former French colonies, things like that. It's something the Bad Empanada has talked about. So, keeping with that, all in all, this book examines erotic art and sex positivity as an alternative to the sex education currently taught or deliberately not taught in curricular, extracurricular spheres. It does so in the hopes of improving upon canonical tutelage through artistic, dialectical material analysis. So it's not just a social thing, but it's socio-material, it's historical material, like through Marx, Capital, the base, and the superstructure, and much more about a combined socio-material approach concerning, conditions thereof that are conducive to liberation relative to sex workers and workers more broadly who are sexualized. We'll get to that when we look at my PhD. Liberation is something that I'm pushing for everyone, but you can't do that by making discussions about sex work or just sexuality taboo. You really can't, Bad Empanada. Sorry, but you're dead wrong as far as that goes. Now, holding people accountable, absolutely, but you can't do that without talking about these things, which you're doing, so hold yourself to the same standard. And I go on to say some various other things as well, things about fair use concerning the exhibit numbers and other ways that I format my works, hyperlinks, the image quality, aliases, and then, because a lot of sex workers that I work with work under aliases, they don't give their actual names. I'm kind of unusual in that respect, but even in my case, I'm a trans woman, so it's like I'm not working under my dead name, for instance. And you could look at what I do as, from a certain point of view, my not so secret identity insofar as, yes, I'm a trans woman. My name is Persephone. I don't go by my dead name. But if you look around everywhere, there's plenty of examples where my dead name is still up. So I talk about aliases. Sex workers survive through the use of online aliases, and the discussion of their trauma requires a degree of anonymity to protect victims from their actual potential abusers. This book also contains trauma, sexual anecdotes from my own life. It discusses my friends, including sex workers and alter ego secret identities they adopt to survive in the wild. Keeping with that, all of the names in this book are code names, except for mine, my late Uncle Dave's, and his ex-wife Erica's, who are only mentioned briefly by their first names. Models, artists desiring a further degree of anonymity, having since quit the business, for example, have been given a code name other than their former branded identities, sans hyperlinks, e.g. Jericho, the name of someone that I worked with who, for various reasons, are just more anonymous. And then last but not least, there's an extended book-wide trigger warning. This entire book thoroughly discusses xenophobia, harmful xenophilia, necrophilia, pedophilia, zoophilia, etc., homophobia, transphobia, ambiphobia, sexism, racism, race, LGBTQ-related hate crimes, murder and domestic abuse, child abuse, spousal abuse, animal abuse, misogyny, and sexual abuse towards all of these groups, power abuse, rape, date, marital, prison, etc., discrimination, war crimes, genocide, religious secular indoctrination and persecution, conversion therapy, man-made ecological disasters, and fascism. So, right off the bat, you're getting this extended, sort of disclaimer, and then you move on to various other things as well. We go to my abstract, so if you skip a couple of pages, my book, Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion, or Gothic Communism, Liberating Sex Work Under Capitalism Through Iconoclastic Art, examines the various differences between sex positivity and sex coercion in sexualized media. Its Gothic gay anarcho-communism combines a wide variety of theories in order to critique capital and capital sexualization of all workers. Anarcho-communism, Marxism, and fourth-wave feminism, with the sharpness of Gothic academic theory, the immediacy of online political discourse, as well as post-colonial, post-human, and queer theory, ludology, sex education, anti-fascist, thus anti-war, anti-capitalist sentiment, poetry, and a variety of ironic, xenophilic sex worker illustrations and negotiating labor exchanges that illustrate mutual consent in Gothic BDSM language. As such, it employs these theories in their respective language holistically and intersectionally to dialectically materially examine and combat unironic xenophobic mental enslavement during the internet age. Specifically, sex positivity tackles how neoliberal state corporate proponents, TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical fascist feminists, and crypto-fascists use canonical imagery created from coerced sex work to affect imagination as a socio-material process, i.e. using canon to generate complicated linguo-material arrangements that continuously exploit sexualized workers through widespread xenophobia under late-stage capitalism, i.e. capitalism sexualizes all workers to heteronormatively serve the profit motive, commonly through harmful Gothic poetics and BDSM theatrics, canonically exploits said arrangements to enshrine their abuse in abject, cryptonymic, ontological crypts, chronotopes that incarcerate, lobotomize, infantilize, and incriminate the public imagination, i.e. Mark Fisher's capitalist realism or myopic inability to imagine a world beyond capitalism, even when capitalism is in decay, whose maxim regarding capitalist realism reads, "It is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism," from capitalist realism. Simultaneously condemn sex-positive artists who seek to liberate sexualized workers through their own iconoclastic, unironically xenophilic praxis, i.e. camping the canon to escape its brutal historical materialism through their own creative successes, achieving praxial catharsis regarding systemic abuse and generational trauma. Sex positivity illustrates, similar to how oscillation is a key component of the Gothic communism is the oscillation between capitalism and anarcho-communism as dialectical material forces felt in Gothic language by real people, oppositional praxis, or the practical application/synthesis of theory and dialectical material opposition to combat nation-states as the ultimate foe. Gothic communism's chief aim is to be campier, thus cooler, sexier, and funnier than Marx, i.e. camping his ghost to develop a holistic, intuitive anarcho-communism begot through a widespread, collective, and solidarized emotional and Gothic intelligence awareness that recultivates the superstructure and reclaims the base through intersectional resistance and de facto extracurricular education. So that's the abstract for the whole book, and the whole book is quite large. It's multiple volumes, in fact, and volumes that are so big that I've had to divide them into sub-volumes and modules and so on and so forth. But this is the abstract for the entire series. And if we scroll down, here's the cover that I originally designed. And again, sex positivity versus sex coercion, or Gothic communism, and, liberating sex work under capitalism through iconoclastic art, written and illustrated by Persephone Vanderwaard, with her original artwork and art for this book made in collaboration with fellow sex workers and artists, edited and co-written by Bay Ryan. Over so many illustrations and exhibits, the number has gone up. Contains academic, erotic, and triggering materials for purposes of critiquing capital, organized religion, for promoting non-coercive sex education, and for providing parody transformation of canonical works. And then we have the cover page here, just the very unsexy cover page, and this is per volume, but again, the title And then Volume 2, Volume 3 of 4 from 0 to 3. Monsters Part 1, Gothic Poetics, Their Usage, First Edition, written and illustrated by Persephone Vanderwaard. And it's technically not the first edition, like version 1.0, but it's been updated. But from the first edition, updated to the current edition. And again, with her original artwork made with other sex workers and artists, written by Bay Ryan. This book is strictly non-profit, not for resale, originally released on her 18 and up website for purposes of sex, gender, and art education, transformation, and critique. So I feel like I'm pretty fucking clear about what I'm about, and I'm not just handing this out to minors and being like, hey kid, read this book. If they somehow access it and they're of an age where I think that they can understand it, then good. But even if I wrote something that was, say, ages 10 and up, like It's Perfectly Normal, books like that are handed out to kids 10 and up who are going through puberty, it takes a very similar approach. It treats the material the same exact way. The style of my artwork was inspired by that author and the illustrator who worked with them. And I'm kind of moving the target audience up to 16 and up, basically, because the academic material that I'm discussing, I don't think a 10-year-old is going to understand Foucault, or critiquing Foucault, or Jean-Paul Sartre, or Simone Beauvoir, or understanding that Marx was homophobic. That those kinds of distinctions are going to be lost in them, I think. So it's not, if someone is precocious and they're able to read the book at that age, ultimately it's for purposes of educating them to, foster a left-leaning sort of mentality, but it's just not who I'm targeting. And I go out of my way to make sure that you can't just go out and access my stuff anywhere but my 18 and up website, which is age gated, and I advertise it through like various platforms that are 18 and up anyways. So the odds of someone under the age of 18 finding this is kind of low, because my target audience is predominantly sex workers, first and foremost. That's who I'm advertising the book amongst. And then lastly, as far as book stuff goes, I thought I would read my PhD thesis statement. So if we go here, thesis paragraph, capitalism sexualizes everything. Now this is, partway into my PhD volume, my thesis volume, aka volume 0. But this is what I consider to be sort of my thesis argument for my dissertation in independent form. After deliberating about the keyword format, I've decided to keep them bold and color-coded to illustrate their presence in the thesis statement in a very graphical way. Many of them will have been defined already. I'm highlighting them again to show their usage as a group of interrelating terms, and this is sort of the style of this particular volume, because it has all of the academic terms and idiosyncratic terms that I've created specialized definitions for, pursuant to the work that I'm doing in particular. This book wasn't written, illustrated for academia, but if it were, and I was seriously treating it as my PhD to defend, I would argue that it addresses a knowledge gap regarding the synthesis of Gothic theory with anarcho-communism, gender studies, ludology, and Marxist argumentation. Capitalism dimorphically sexualizes all work to some degree, including sex work, resulting in sex coercive media and gender roles via universal alienation through monstrous language. This requires an iconoclasm to combat the systemic bigotries that result, as the title reads, liberating of sex work under capitalism through iconoclastic art. Gothic communism is our ticket towards that end, i.e., developing anarcho-communism, hence a post-scarcity world without nation-states and their built-in, thus historical material, genocide and exploitation of workers. My teaching approach stresses oppositional praxis according to sex positivity versus sex coercion, one reclaiming the harmful language of stigma, bias, control, fear, and hate from our colonizers, capitalists, but also power exchange and resistance as a cultural means of social sexual catharsis and theatrical disguise, i.e. cultivating emotional and Gothic intelligence through a reclaimed Gothic mode of artistic, thus political, collective self-expression, monstrous poetics and applied Gothic theories. Capitalism sexualizes everything for the profit motive, using canonical, dimorphic, Cartesian, monstrous poetics to brainwash workers and pit them against each other during capitalist realism, i.e. the shadow of Pygmalions, monomyth, cycle of kings, and infernal concentric pattern. Unironic rape and war are everything because capitalism rapes everything for profit, including people's minds, according to a profit motive that synonymizes all of these things. Utilized deliberately by Gothic communism, subversive Amazonomachia, dark forces, its famous Miltonian paradoxes, and manifesto coordinates, the tenets, theories, and means and materials of expression, fetishes, and cliches, etc., can revert capitalist realism's doomed narrative of the crypt by putting rape and war in quotes, recultivating the superstructure, and reclaiming the base during class/culture wars. Camping of canon, the asymmetrical nature of guerrilla warfare obviously covers an extremely wide range of artistic possibilities, but generally focuses on sex work and its canonical dimorphic sexualization, or work in general is similarly sexualized, and heteronormative enforcement, the colonial binary, established through regressive Amazonomachia as something to camp, i.e. through ironic kink, fetishization and BDSM rituals, aesthetics of psychosexual power and death, stigma and revenge, but also catharsis and transformation, etc., with demonic undead poetics synthesized through the creative successes of proletarian praxis as a class-conscious, ready for war response to critique of capital. My admittedly rather long thesis paragraph. But this is, 2 pages, or a page if you got rid of the image. That is my thesis statement and the abstract, and then the rest of the book, because you have, I'm afraid to scroll through it, but because there's a lot of nude images, but hundreds of pages just in this volume alone, hundreds of pages in this volume, and then as well as the other volumes that I've written, and the extra textual documents, the paratextual stuff on my blog and my website and on Twitter and YouTube videos. I don't make as many of those nowadays, but I'm very productive. So you have the abstract, you have the disclaimer, and you have the thesis paragraph from my PhD, which I absolutely would consider my PhD if not for the fact that it's independent postgraduate research that I took and sort of went beyond academia and its constraints surrounding the discussion of sexual topics, unless you're, I don't know, a sex pest like Foucault. And there are plenty of academics who do very good research, but there are also plenty of sexual predators, just like there are on YouTube. But YouTube in particular suffers a similar problem to academia insofar as the discussion of topics like sexuality, gender studies, and BDSM is highly policed. And you have to write it in a particular way. And I'm not doing that because I'm challenging the profit motive very directly in an anarcho-communist way. So, all that being said, that's sort of what my work is about, and that's sort of the length that I go to, stress my areas of study, the holistic nature of my work, but also the narrow to broad goals of said work, my target audience, and all kinds of different things to, put in front of something so that, I'm trying to be a responsible academic and sex worker and practitioner of these different things in a professional setting, but also admittedly a casual setting to some extent. Like, this concerns things that I do just on a daily basis, even though much of what I do is not casual. It's for purposes of education, of activism, of liberation, etc. So that kind of summarizes the work that I do more broadly, but I wanted to also just provide some other readily available examples just to kind of walk you through things. So let's do that real quick. So first and foremost, I have my undergraduate degree. I got that from Eastern Michigan University in Language, Literature, and Writing. But then I have my my master's degree in Gothic, what did they call it specifically? Gothic studies? I think it was written studies or English studies, the Gothic. I forget the exact name of my degree, but I have a master's in Gothic literature from Manchester Metropolitan University. So the first thing I want to stress is, yes, I am a real person, Bad Empanada, and I had to jump through some fairly substantial hoops to even get my master's degree because I was an international student from America, the Imperial Core. Yes, I recognize America bad. I get it. But as an international student, I wanted to articulate that based on something I wrote 5 years ago after I graduated. So this is what I wrote. Someone on Quora asked, how easy is it to get into Manchester Metropolitan University? And this was my answer. And then, yep, there's my dead name. You know, I can't hide that. I could probably change it, but in any event, my answer to their question, that depends on where you're from. If you're an overseas student like I was, there's a fair bit of extra paperwork involved, to say the least. Essentially, you have to apply to the school and be accepted, but this is only the beginning. In short, getting accepted into MMU was easy enough. The logistics of actually attending were far more arduous. Even the acceptance process itself has multiple steps. One, I had to initially apply to the school, which requires filling out the required forms and supplying the school with my academic transcript and 2 letters of recommendation. Overseas students require 2, not 1. Because I had yet to finish my BA, I had to promise that I'd be graduating on a specific date to international admissions. This required proof, hence more paperwork. Once accepted, the school sent me a conditional offer letter, the condition being that I finish my BA. First, I had to accept the offer by writing to them and stating that I did, indeed, accept their conditional offer. Then I had to meet the condition itself. I completed my final classes and sent my final academic transcript to admissions, as well as photos of my diploma. Upon receiving it, they sent me an unconditional offer, which I also had to accept via email. Technically, this is getting into MMU. Turns out accepting the school's unconditional offer is only the start to a very long Byzantine process. Note, this portion is additional and different for British students, but I wish to include it because it was frankly a giant pain in the ass, something overseas applicants should keep in mind. As an overseas student, attending MMU requires the acquisition of a student visa, funding and accommodations, a traveling grad student's trifecta. I would need a Tier 4 student visa to stay in Manchester for the school year. However, to even apply for one, a CAS, or Confirmation of Acceptance of Studies number, is required. To receive a CAS, I had to fill out a CAS form. Before doing this, I needed to prove that I had the fiscal means to attend MMU. This includes living expenses and accommodations. To do this, I had to complete the steps listed in the PDF document available on MMU's U.S. funding page. These involved completing a FAFSA form, an application for student aid. This generated an SAR, or Student Aid Report, which I needed to send to MMU's U.S. Financial Aid Department. In turn, they eventually sent me an award letter outlining distribution of funds. Upon accepting it, I completed my CAS form. CAS in hand, I then had to apply for the visa itself. This required a passport, but also paying hundreds of dollars in various paperwork costs, as well as an NHS fee, and going to a visa application center in person. There I had to gather biometric data, mainly fingerprints. I then had to mail out said data, along with my visa application and physical passport, to a visa processing facility. This required buying a special shipping label, attaching it to an envelope at a UPS store, and mailing it out. Several weeks later, I received my temporary visa. The physical visa would be provided after pre-enrollment, and got my passport back after that. Apart from my visa, I also had to apply for accommodation, which I couldn't do without an award letter from MMU's U.S. Financial Aid Department. Once I'd received and accepted my award letter, I applied for accommodation through the school. The selection process took multiple steps, lasting over several weeks. Keep in mind, many of these applications for my visa, financial aid, and accommodation were occurring at roughly the same time, with mild assurances to the people involved that the required forms were in the mail. Eventually, though, I had my loans, my accommodation, and my temporary visa. During all of this, I had to schedule my flight to arrive for pre-enrollment before the semester began. Once I flew in from America, I arrived at my residence. A few days later, pre-enrollment occurred. There I had to supply my visa, passport, credentials, and other germane support documents to a member of MMU's U.S. Financial Aid Department. Once immigration knew I was actually in the UK, I was notified of when and where to go to pick up my actual physical visa. Having it, and having completed pre-enrollment, I could then open a bank account, which my remaining loan money would be distributed to after a month. In the meantime, I could finally register for my classes. That's right. After getting into the college and having gone through the entire labyrinthine process, registering for my classes was practically the final step. So, yes, I'm a real person, and this is what I had to go through to do my overseas graduate work, stemming, from my undergraduate work and everything that went into that I don't necessarily have to explain, but it's like it stands to reason that I got my master's based on the fact that I had my bachelor's, and they're both real. I'm a real person, and this was a difficult pain in the ass for me, let alone for someone from a non-English speaking country, someone out of the imperial core. I had it relatively easy, and it was still difficult. Um, so this is just outlining me getting my master's degree, and this would have been in 2017 when I originally went through the process, and I was in the UK from September of 2017 until August of 2018, and then I flew home after that and finished writing my master's thesis, and then from there I presented it to my supervisors in Great Britain, and then following that whole process, they took it, it went under review, they critiqued it. It was a pass or fail type situation, so I passed, and it was released as part of my academic corpus, if you will. So, point in fact, if we go here, Lost in Necropolis, the continuation of Castle narrative beyond the novel or cinema and into Metroidvania, Persephone Vanderward, 2018, Manchester Metropolitan University, academia.edu is just a place where I post different things. So, like, if we click, all right, it's incognito. Well, anyways, we can read the start of it, just because I have my incognito window open at the moment, because other windows and things just have nudity and stuff that I do on a regular basis, so I'm scared to open other windows and things like that. But basically, this dissertation concerns terror in Gothic stories, wherein space is predominant and bigger than the monsters inside. These spaces are examined according to Mikhail Bakhtin's chronotype of castle narrative, which outlines the Gothic as a storytelling mode according to conventions of the novel. This dissertation moves beyond the novel and examines the castle narrative as told through motion in response to Gothic affect. This can be found all across media and manifests according to 6 qualities of Gothic space, by which time is always a factor. And then I have different chapters, and I talk about older Gothic media from Radcliffean novels to 20th century cinema. Then I talk about video games and Metroidvania, and then I do a close read. So there's that. That is my master's thesis, what the British would call a dissertation, but you can download it for free. If you go to academia, it's not exactly a place that minors go to, but it's a place where I can share my academic work. And if you click on here, I think it'll, yeah. So I'm nobody as far as academic circles go, but I do have different things. I have different papers that I try to submit, different things that I wrote when I was in undergrad. In grad school, I had to do critical reviews, different essays, different scripts. I went to different conventions after I graduated. My master's thesis, this got me an award that helped me get into grad school. This was an independent study that I did to help me graduate so that I could go to grad school. This was another thing that I did when I was this was part of a module, so it was part of you had to do a critical review and then like a little short essay per like a critical essay. So you had to like respond to someone, but then you had to try and write something yourself per module. And these were like mini exercises before I wrote my master's thesis. So this was part of that when MMU grad school module essay 2017. I've done different symposiums. This was at a conference. This was also at a conference, and this was at a conference. So these were like conference things. And again, most of these aren't very popular. The most popular one is the one that I wrote about, dragon sickness and the problem of greed. So I wrote that when I was in the closet, and I was talking about Marxism and a Marxist reading of Tolkien, and then I took that since then and have applied it to my postgraduate work. But anyways, I'm a real person. You know, I have real credentials. I'm not employed by any institution, but it's like I have attended conferences. I've spent money. I've gone to them. I've given talks in front of people. I have videos of me doing that. So it's like, again, it's real. It's like my research. This all goes into my research. I cite some of these things in follow up material, aka my novels, and so again, I'm a real person. And then the rest of these links are things that I'll talk about, just to articulate that yes, these are things that I can show on YouTube, basically. But if you go to my website here, this specific page, and you click on it, the first thing that happens when you go to my website, age verification, you must be 18 years or older. You must be 18 years old or older to enter, but that's the plugin says that. I didn't design that. vanderwaardart.com, a place for queer expression in the Gothic imagination. You know, different links, home, gallery, just some of my art that I used to do, except the cookies, I guess. Got my book, Gothic Communism, the book details about the author. We'll look at that page. Commissions, partners, Bay Ryan, they're a co-writer and editor for my book. Crow's another partner of mine. Different projects that I've done aside from this book series, and different models and sex work that I do. You know, sex work with models, and then these are some of my muses, people that I work with who are a bit more, you know, professional, that kind of thing. And then, you know, this is the promo page for my upcoming book, Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion of Gothic Communism, co-written, edited with my partner, Bay Ryan, made in collaboration with numerous other sex workers. Sex Positivity is a non-profit, 4-volume series on sex positivity in the Gothic. Each time a new volume goes live, I will post an update directly below that includes a download link and other relevant info. In the meantime, feel free to scroll down and browse the rest of the page, where you can read the abstract and summaries per volume, view the cover illustrations, and learn about the project history and logo design. Permissions: any publicly available images are exhibited for purposes of education, transformation, and critique, thus fall under fair use. Private nude material and collabs with models are specifically shared with permission from the original models. For details about artist permission, refer to the book disclaimer attached to my book sample series. So I've already read the abstract. I've already read the disclaimer, so we don't have to go over that. And then, you know, so this is one page. And this is the page where you can go to download all of the volumes. And if you do, then you would have access to these volumes that I looked at here. And then if we go to about the author here, if we go to the about the author here, there's a couple images of me. This is like a sort of an artistic nude, so I've scrolled down so you can't see the, like, there's shadow, bush shadow. It's very, very tame, but it is, again, you'll get the same notifications about, you know, you have to be 18 to view the page, that kind of thing. And so it's age gated again, but I'm a real person. This is a photo of me in Manchester. Both of these photos were actually taken when I was in Manchester by the person I was dating at the time. Persephone van der Waard is the author of Sex Positivity, its art director, sole invigilator, and primary editor. The other co-writer, co-editor being Bay Ryan. She is a male to female trans woman, atheist, Satanist, polypan kinkster with 2 partners, including her multiple playmates, friends, and collaborators. Persephone and her 13 muses work play together on sex positivity and on her artwork at large as a sex-positive force. First and foremost, she is a sex work activist, fighting for sex worker liberation through iconoclastic sex-positive artwork. For that, she is an anarcho-communist writer, illustrator, BDSM educator, bad Empanada, sex worker, genderqueer environmental activist, and Gothic ludologist, with her independent PhD having been written on Metroidvania combined with the above variables. I age to coin and articulate Ludo-Gothic BDSM as a sex-positive poetic device. Ludo-Gothic BDSM, it's a term that I coined, my combining of an older academic term, ludic Gothic video games with sex-positive BDSM theatrics, as a potent means of camp. The emphasis is less about how video games can be gothic, and more how the playfulness in video games is commonly used to allow players to camp canon in and out of video games as a form of negotiated power exchange established in playful game-like forms, theater, and rules. Commonly gleaned through Metroidvania as I envision it, but frankly performed in any kind of Gothic poetics, i.e. to playfully attain what I call the palliative numinous, or the Gothic quest for self-destructive power as something to camp. And then Ludo-Gothic, Gothic video games. The Ludo-Gothic is created when the Gothic is transformed by the video game medium and is a kindred genre to survival horror. Source, Laurie Taylor's Gothic Bloodlines in Survival Horror Gaming, back from 2009. She sometimes writes reviews, Gothic analyses, and interviews for fun on her old blog, or does continual independent research on Metroidvania and speedrunning every now and again. If you're interested in her work, or curious about illustrated or written commissions, please refer to her commissions page for more information. And click here to read about the entire Sex Positivity book project. Click here to see the extended 2-volume book sample, brace for impacts, table of contents, and full disclaimer. So I have a blog series basically where you can, instead of just downloading the PDF files, you can view the files separately as blog posts and have access to the images and exhibits that I invigilate and post. So again, this is all real. This is a real website, and it has a very specific purpose in mind, including, about me as a real person, a trans woman, a researcher, an educator. I am a BDSM doctor as far as I concern it. I am an independent form thereof. But did you know that once upon a time, doctors didn't go to university? Doctors were basically friars in monasteries and nuns, and there were it was a medievalist function to it, and the idea that, oh, well, you have to be a doctor from, I don't know, fucking Harvard or something before you're taken seriously. And it's like, no, it's not necessarily the case. And whoops, well, anyways, there's the shadow of my crotch, but whatever. It's, as far as I'm concerned, pubic hair, but if that gets my video age gated or whatever, I guess I don't really care. Like, this kind of thing is artistic nudity. Like, this is pretty fucking tame. This is like Michelangelo's David or something like that. I don't want to compare myself specifically to that statue, but it's an artistic nude. It's not something that I would consider even pornographic. It's not even, it's barely even nudism. You can't even see anything. It's like I cropped the image actually to avoid the showing of my genitals. It's just pubic hair. And this is the kind of thing that you would go and see in an art museum or something like that. So, yes, this is like, and this is very tame compared to what I normally show. But even here, with this kind of image, I try and crop it and censor it, so I ease readers into what I'm talking about, even with myself as a real person. And then there are various different things on my blog that sort of tie into the work that I do as well. Apart from my website, which I focus on predominantly nowadays, there are various examples of things on my old blog on Blogger, revisiting my master's thesis on Metroidvania, our ludic masters, and the dominating game space, which is where I eventually would begin to think about Gothic poetics and play and BDSM. So this is the first time I really sort of thought about that, and this was in 2021, and I started Sex Positivity in mid 2022. But if we type BDSM, remember what I said about consent. In this manner, the Metroidvania players consent to the game by adopting a submissive position. Most people sexualize BDSM, but power is exchanged in any scenario, sexual or otherwise. This being said, Gothic power exchanges are often sexualized. Samus is vulnerable when denuded, her naked body exposed to the hostile alien menace. RE, the end scene from Alien. Metroidvania can show dominance and submission through a player that winds up on the hip, an old expression that means to be at a disadvantage. Another way to think of it, the player is the bottom and they're being topped by the game. So this is something that I wrote back in 2021. Then I talk about why I submit a sub-gothicist attitudes on Metroidvania, mommy doms, and sexual persecution. In short, why people like me are interested in this kind of thing, why we talk about it on a regular basis, why we educate other people about it in a sex-positive, academic to non-academic way, and what it pertains to as far as our persecution under the status quo. This is something, again, that I wrote, shortly after revisiting my master's thesis. I wrote that on the 11th of that year. I wrote this on the 19th of the same month. Then the series abstract, Mazes and Labyrinths, Disempowerment in Metroidvania and Survival Horror. This post is the abstract for my upcoming interview series, Mazes and Labyrinths, which is basically my PhD research. And at the time, I was interviewing speedrunners and Twitch streamers about disempowerment inside Metroidvania and horror games, because they're the ones who are playing Metroidvania in particular. So I wanted to ask them their feelings about this kind of stuff. And specifically examines how mazes and labyrinths, along with their historically heavy contents, are used to disempower players. This was an April 14th, 2021. Update, July 20th, 2024. I've written a 3-part book chapter on Metroidvania for my sex positivity book series, She Fucks Back, or Revisiting the Modern Prometheus Through Astronoetics, the Man of Reason and Cartesian Hubris versus the Whim of Nature in Metroidvania. Said chapter concerns Frankenstein, aka the modern Prometheus, and talks extensively about the Promethean quest as it appears in popular media. After Shelley's novel, it focuses on Metroidvania, of course, with close reads in Hollow Knight and Axiom Verge, but also I talk about movies like Forbidden Planet and Alien. Click here to read the entire chapter on my website book sample. It combines my PhD research after writing my PhD, Volume 0 of Sex Positivity, making She Fucks Back a culmination of my life's work on the subject. I'm very proud of it. So this is something that I released. My partner needs healthcare for medical reasons. They have chronic fatigue syndrome. They have asthma, ADHD, and OCD. They're on the spectrum and are neurodivergent. They're an indigenous person. They're Māori from New Zealand. Despite the fact that they have pale skin, they are, and mixed race, they are indigenous. So, I raise funds for them. And this is a picture of them. Bay is disabled and gets partial aid through the state. They do sex work, but rely on donations to get by. You can support Bay on OnlyFans, but also through their Ko-Fi. And then there's a portfolio page that I've set up for them on my website. So Bay Ryan, they're a real person too, Bad Empanada, and we talk about sexuality all the time in an academic sense, but also in a casual sense that represents who we are. So we're real people. I also talk about Book Sample Volume 1, Paid Labor. I wanted to put out a small 6-page sample for my latest volume, which released on Valentine's, nothing terribly long, but something I feel speaks to an important topic, paying workers. And if we scroll down, paid labor, summarizing praxis is something to synthesize by paying workers. America's not a country, it's just a business. Now fucking pay me. This mini section, 6 pages, offers a brief repose before we dive into the rest of the volume. While the manifesto has already covered a lot, I'd like to stress the labor value of sex work as a paid means of synthesizing praxis, i.e. when preventing state abuse through sex work is a valid service that should be monetarily compensated for its labor value. This includes artwork, writing, and sex work as indiscrete categories illustrating mutual consent, e.g. this book and its combination of the three, illustrating how intersectional solidarity works through a variety of creative practices that support one another through negotiating labor exchanges and boundary-forming exercises. To that, paid labor briefly discusses an important refrain to solidarize labor under sex positivity. Sex work is work, which needs to be paid, but many different kinds of work constitute sex work because capitalism sexualizes all workers. As such, sex work can be summarized as collective, iconoclastic worker action against the heteronormative settler-colonial status quo, art, porn, prostitution, writing, and intersections of these devices when collective negotiation and expression of worker rights and boundaries happen through informed class and culture-conscious worker solidarity. And then there's an image here from Fired Up Stilettos. They're an activist group from New Zealand that talks about paying sex workers, stripping is not consent, things like that. So they raise money to get by, but also raise awareness towards what they're doing as a form of activism. Actors trying to liberate themselves and others under capital are just activists, and they exist, they're real, And they often know a lot more about this stuff than Bad Empanada does, by virtue of the fact that they do sex work on the regular, but also they have a pretty firm grasp of the theory. It's good praxis. And what Bad Empanada does in saying that BDSM doctors aren't real, it's bad praxis. So there's that. Also, I write about Zionism and Judas Priest, and this piece considers the Zionist potential of the new Judas Priest album, Invincible Shield, i.e. from a post-colonial lens. I'm a fan of their music, but so it breaks my heart that, someone like Judas Priest, fronted by a gay man, would basically, lean into Zionist rhetoric in the middle of a genocide. So I talk about that. So this kind of activism is something that I do as a real person, talking about this. And Bushnell's Requiem, an ode to martyr. This 12-page piece is dedicated to Aaron Bushnell, the 25-year-old airman who burned himself to death on February 25th, 2025. In doing so, he martyred himself through extremist protest of the Palestinian genocide currently being conducted by Israel and its Western allies. And this piece was actually inspired by Bad Empanada. This piece was inspired by someone I respect, but whose apathy and myopia I wish to respond to. Bad Empanada and his video, Americans Demand I Praise U.S. Soldier, who self-immolated to protest Gaza genocide. I will respond to it in his second channel's community section. I thought your refusal to say anything about Aaron Bushnell's martyrdom at all, only to comment on American jingoism and all importance, is, I feel, incredibly myopic and apathetic, e.g. I don't care, which you've said as much, i.e. to overlook something vital merely to state the obvious, thereby avoiding solidarity with Americans who otherwise might agree with you during a shared struggle against larger forces at play. It's not praise to call Bushnell a martyr, it's a fact. He was an anarcho-communist, and this act wasn't a spontaneous one made by a weekend warrior. He lived it, dude. And, I think it's kind of rich that you critique Americans and devalue them, but you're an Australian citizen, and you live in Argentina, so at this point, I don't know, dual citizenship, but you are not originally from Argentina. Like, you're an Aussie. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand it, you have dual citizenship. So should I discount the value of what you did because you come from a particular place? It's like, so, and the fact that you would do this with someone like Aaron Bushnell, it's like, no, this is a difficult topic. Martyrdom is a difficult topic, but the way that you dismiss it out of hand is very similar to how you dismiss me out of hand and what I do. And so despite the fact that you're very rigid and firm about your post-colonial stance, which is important, your social understanding of concepts like martyrdom, suicide bombing, and things like that, are they only valid if non-Americans do them? And are they only valid if, like, what about if someone is protesting the Vietnam War, the Kent State shootings, were they not valid when they were shot? And also, in regards to Nex Benedict and them trying to exist, they were a 16-year-old trans-masked non-binary student who was killed in the girls' bathroom of Owasso, Oklahoma. Are they not valid? Like, they were martyred too, just for being themselves. And, this is very much something about them living and dying by what they did. And that's something that they did and what Bushnell did. And you have other activists like Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning, who worked for the military and then who changed their minds, and Howard Zinn, who worked for the military and changed his mind. Bob fucking Ross worked for the military and changed his mind. So it's like, you have to have some nuance and not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, people are real insofar as they can transition. I came out of the closet at the age of 36 and dedicated my life basically from, undergrad onward. So from 2014 to the present space and time, I've worked very hard to change how I feel about things. I used to be very problematic in my beliefs. I was very in the closet. I was very cishet. I didn't identify as I do now. And that's been a work in progress, but it's led towards what I am presently, which is an expert of BDSM in a way that I would consider to be overqualified. I know a lot more about it than you do. And I work with a lot of people who know a lot more about it than you do. And we're marginalized and oppressed to varying degrees. relatively speaking, I'm middle class, but I'm still a trans woman. And my partner is someone who is immunocompromised, who lives in state housing and is currently suffering tremendous difficulty due to the cutting back in aid for people in difficult or marginalized positions. Disabilities and disability aid is something that is currently being throttled by the New Zealand government, and they're indigenous and various other things, axes of oppression that, are overlapping with them and making their life difficult. And there's someone that I'm trying to help and whose own work and arguments bleed into mine. They edited and co-wrote my PhD, and it's had a tremendous effect on what I did. So it's like, yes, we are real. And then also psychosexual martyrdom is something where I talk about ask the reader to humanize the oppressed through reclaimed monsters by learning from the monstrous past is something to recreate ourselves in our own artwork and BDSM. And so we talk about things from demons, the undead, humanity's primer, where we reclaim monsters with. And what do you think gay people are? What do you think sex workers are? We're the scum of the earth. We're the kind of thing that you putting like a taboo on talking about sexuality as part of our survival would harm us, bad Empanada. Like, you lack nuance in that particular field. I'm a post-colonialist like you, but I actually have nuance insofar as these kinds of things are performed, how they're articulated in an academic to non-academic setting. And like the way that you're sort of smug about this kind of thing, frankly, it kind of pisses me off, if I'm being entirely honest. I don't like it. I like the work that you do, and you stand up for, genocide, and you side with the Palestinians and other oppressed groups, and you're anti-American. So am I. I'm anti-American. I'm anti, genocide, profit. I'm an anarcho-communist. You have to challenge profit, which normally sexualizes workers, concomitant to settler colonial practices and all of the elements of the colonial binary that manifest in heteronormative Cartesian ways. And why do you think I'm referencing Frankenstein here? And the Cartesian sort of man of reason shooting him as an abject being of nature. And I don't have time to read this right now, but it's like, you get the fucking idea, I think. And then, it's like I'm still writing about stuff like this, capping off my magnum opus and exploring rape play and consent, non-consent, which is a valid form of BDSM, and talking about it in ways that, concern monsters and video games and Metroidvania, specifically the Radiance and Hollow Knight, and acting out our own abuse and what's happened to us in ways that someone like you, I don't know if you have what it takes to be able to look at that in good faith. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I don't think you don't. Your sense of humor is incredibly dismissive. It's like, I am a person, and the work that I do concerns people that you're likewise trying to protect. It's like sex work is something that oppressed peoples do in the global south as well as the global north, and in places other than America and the imperial core. It's like the things that I'm talking about occur in other countries that are preyed upon by the United States and neoliberal capitalism, regardless of where exactly it is on the globe. So, it's like, don't dismiss us and discredit what we do, comrade. We're not the enemy. The state is. Neoliberal capitalism is. American liberalism is. It's like, yeah, down with the state of Israel. Palestine shall be free. It's like that. Those are important things. But so is sex work. So is discussing this kind of stuff, while at the same time outing activists acting in bad faith, like Ian Kaczynski or Demon Mama, whose real name I don't know, because I just found out about them, thanks to you in a video that you shared. But the kind of apathy that you have towards someone like me and the people that I work with, who generally speaking are survival sex workers and marginalized people, trans men, trans women, people of color, religious minorities, and disabled people. Like, I'm working for all of them, using the privilege that I have and the platforms that I've tried very hard to cultivate outside of YouTube and away from Twitter and other platforms. It's very important what I'm doing. I'm trying to liberate all workers, because this pertains to you too, and other workers who are forced to live in a world where men are men and women are women and anything else is alien or abject. And honestly, women are abject too, and nature is monstrous feminine. And there's so many things that I'm trying to challenge and liberate all of us from, including you. So I would advise you to be a little less blunt force with your humor insofar as it pertains to people like me. I hate Vosh. I hate people like him. I have entire book chapters dedicated to people like him. And it's like, I can show you them if you like. And I've messaged you about this before and you just don't respond to me. And it's like, fine, whatever. I don't care. You've stated before that you don't respond to things except drama, I guess, and like low-hanging fruit. But it's like, I'm not a sex pest. I'm an educator and a sex worker and an artist and an invigilator, and a lot of my friends are too. So, kindly, watch what you say. Frankly, I think it's bullshit. In any event, this is, I just wanted to get this off my chest. I deal with enough stupid horseshit from tokenized elements of my own community and people punching down against each other. But something like this is, coming from someone who thinks and, that their shit doesn't stink and that they're incapable of putting their foot in their mouth and saying stupid shit. And yeah, it pisses me off that some fucking asshole from Oz who's living in Argentina or wherever and, does a lot of good work, takes upon it himself to just kind of lump so many different things together without context. And then if I try and mention, well, actually, this is what I do, and then he's like, LOL, you're not real. That's part of the problem. You realize like how many cops say that about us, or people like Ian Kaczynski or Demon Mama would say things like that about us. It's like, you're doing the same thing as them. And I respect you for going after them, but do not dismiss like what I do and what people like me do. Like, we're all allies in the same situation here. So just don't do that, man. It's not cool. It's like, we share the same causes largely, but it's like, if you're going to go after people, don't make puritanical comments like make talking about sex openly and is their main interest taboo. Like, you realize that that's a fascist talking point, right? It's like, that's something that the Puritans in a Nathaniel Hawthorne novel would say. It's like, it's not funny, it's not a joke, especially if you turn right around and say, you're not real, and then you dismiss me and say, Jesus Christ. So don't do that, okay? In any event, that's pretty much everything. I'm a real person. You have an idea of the work that I do. I've tried to share it in such a way that, okay, like I gave you the abstract, I showed you the disclaimer, the platforms that I work on, and like the struggle that I had to go through to get through, grad school, and then various things that I wrote after that that turned into my, PhD volume, and then multiple books after that I haven't even had time to really show. They're all available on my website. It's nonprofit. Like, what more do you fucking want? But in any event, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there and say something, because as much as I respect the post-colonialist work that Empanada does, I think he's kind of an asshole when it comes to other things. And don't get me wrong, even with something like Jesse Gender, I'm in total agreement with him about something like that, where if you go to his channel and like just click on it here, weaponized social justice, Jesse Gender should delete her Zionist propaganda video immediately. I'm in full agreement with that. Yes, what Jesse Gender did was really fucking weird. And when I saw that, I'm like, wait, didn't they just say something about what happened in Hollywood and that Jewish director who was speaking out against Palestine, and they were being sort of dogpiled by those in Hollywood? And it's like, Jesse made a video about that, but then they make like a 4-hour long video about why we need to listen to Zionists. It's like, yes, I agree with this video entirely. But then if you have like these snide, backhanded sort of comments or dismissing that I exist, and you're acting like you're an expert or an authority on this, and that's going to blow back on people like me. It's like, yes, I talk about sex on a regular basis. I talk about the understanding of it through performance art and academic material and extracurricular content that I sell, not sell, but invigilate and make available to an 18 and up audience. Like, it's like, if you, I'm not Ian Kaczynski, I'm not Demon Mama. It's like I'm not a sex pest, and that kind of thing really pisses me off when you start using language like that. You are not an expert on this shit. I am, asshole. I know a lot more about BDSM than you. I know a lot more about trans rights than you. I live it because it's a part of my existence. And to have someone like you basically dismiss me and put me in the same category as Ian Kaczynski, it's fucking horseshit. Okay, I think I've repeated myself enough at that point. I'm sort of venting, but also you do it all the time, so fuck yourself. But also, good work on Gaza and, holding the left accountable. Nice work, but also fuck you for lacking nuance. Which ironically, you critique Jesse Gender for not having nuance. You don't have it either sometimes, dude. But yeah, so there's that. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.